The last signal. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of the colonial defense vessel Hyperion, watching the unfamiliar stars of the Centauri sector drift by. 3 years had passed since the Voidborn destroyed Earth, their crystalline ships descending from deep space to shatter humanity's cradle into cosmic dust. The loss still felt fresh, like a wound that refused to heal. "Commander," Lieutenant Rivera's voice cut through her thoughts. "We're picking up a signal on the old Earth frequencies." Chen turned from the viewport, her expression carefully neutral despite the surge of hope and dread that warred in her chest. "Source: Research Station Omega, ma'am." "It's..." Rivera's dark eyes widened. "It's Dr. Alexandra Santos." The name hit Chen like a physical blow. Santos had been Earth's leading xenobiologist, presumed lost with billions of others when the Voidborn attacked. If she had survived, if she had found something, "Put it through," Chen ordered, gripping the command rail as static filled the bridge. "This is Dr. Alexandra Santos of Research Station Omega." The voice was distorted but unmistakable. "To any human colonies receiving this transmission, we found it. We know why they came. We know how to stop them. But we need help." A pause, filled with the sound of distant alarms. "They're coming. Please hurry." The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Chen didn't hesitate. "Navigation. Plot a course to Omega's coordinates. Communications. Send word to every colony in range. Tell them." She took a deep breath. "Tell them we found survivors from Earth." The Hyperion's engines hummed to life as Rivera worked his console. "Ma'am, Omega's in the void zone. No ship that's gone in has come out." "No ship had a reason to come out before," Chen replied. "Now we do." The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation. The Hyperion wasn't meant for deep space combat. It was a colonial defense vessel, built to protect the outer settlements from pirates and the occasional aggressive local wildlife. But Chen's crew worked tirelessly, retrofitting what they could and praying it would be enough. They were 3 hours from the Void Zone's border when the first refugees arrived. Civilian ships, dozens of them, their hulls scared and systems failing. Chen ordered them brought aboard, ignoring Rivera's concerns about resources in space. She remembered being a refugee herself, remembered watching Earth die from a civilian transport much like these. The refugees' stories were all the same. The Voidborn were moving again, methodically hunting down human settlements. Their crystalline ships appeared without warning, their weapon systems bypassing shields as if they didn't exist. They weren't just killing humans anymore. They were taking them, somehow drawing them out of their bodies in streams of light that fed into their ships' glowing cores. "It's happening again," an elderly woman told Chen, her hands shaking around a cup of synthetic coffee. "Just like Earth. They're not going to stop until we're all gone." Chen shared the refugee reports with her command staff, watching their faces grow grim as they realized the scope of what they faced. The Voidborn weren't finished with humanity. Earth had just been the beginning. "We should turn back," her tactical officer argued. "Warn the other colonies, organize a proper defense force." "By then it'll be too late," Chen countered. "Whatever Dr. Santos found, it's important enough that the Voidborn are willing to come out of hiding to stop her. We need that information." The debate might have continued, but a sensor alert cut it short. Ships were approaching, not the crystalline formations of the Voidborn, but the familiar silhouettes of human vessels. Colonial ships, their designs as varied as the settlements they came from. Chen counted at least 30 before the sensors overloaded. "They got our message," Rivera said softly. "They came." The fleet that assembled at the edge of the Void Zone was unlike anything humanity had mustered since Earth's fall. Heavy warships from the militant Sparta colony flew alongside sleek research vessels from the Europa Scientific Collective. Mining ships bristling with industrial cutting lasers took up formation next to converted civilian cruisers. Different colonies, different philosophies, but united by a common purpose. Chen found herself in command, not through rank or authority, but because the Hyperion had received Santos's signal first. She stood on her bridge, looking at the faces of the other captains on her display screen, and felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. "We all know what's at stake," she told them. "The Voidborn took Earth from us. They're trying to take everything else. But today, we have a chance to fight back." Dr. Santos found something on that station. Something they're afraid of. "We're going to get that information, and we're going to make them pay for every human life they've taken." The responses came back, one by one. Some were formal acknowledgments, others just determined nods. The captain of a Spartan warship raised his fist and shouted, "For Earth." The cry was taken up by others, spreading through the fleet like fire through dry grass. Chen gave the order, and the fleet moved as one into the void zone. The darkness seemed to swallow them whole, the familiar stars disappearing behind them like memories of a brighter past. Ahead lay only questions, danger, and perhaps, if they were very lucky, hope. They were an hour into the zone when the sensors detected the first crystalline formations, glowing with their own inner light. The Voidborn had found them. The battle for humanity's future was about to begin. Scattered stars. The Voidborn ships moved like shards of broken light through space, their crystalline surfaces refracting the distant starlight into painful patterns. Commander Chen watched them approach on the Hyperion's main display, her mind racing through combat scenarios, each one worse than the last. "Multiple contacts," Rivera reported, his voice steady despite the tension. "Counting 15. No, 20 crystalline vessels. They're moving to surround us. Sparta colony vessels moving to intercept," the tactical officer added. "Europa science ships falling back to protected positions." Chen nodded, studying the deployment. The Spartan ships were built for war, heavily armored and bristling with weapons. If anything in the fleet could go toe-to-toe with the Voidborn, it would be them. But something about the enemy formation bothered her. "They're hurting us," she realized suddenly. "Lieutenant, pull up the star charts. Show me what's behind us." The holographic display shifted, revealing a massive dust cloud stretching across their retreat path. Initially invisible to their sensors, it would tear any ship apart that tried to punch through at speed. "All ships, break formation," Chen ordered. "They want us clustered together. Don't give them the target." The fleet scattered just as the first Voidborn beam lanced through space. It caught a Spartan warship dead center, but instead of the expected explosion, something far worse happened. The beam seemed to pull at the ship, drawing streams of luminescent energy from its hull. Inside those streams, Chen could almost see faces. "They're not trying to destroy us," Rivera whispered. "They're harvesting us." The battle erupted in earnest. The Spartan ships opened fire with everything they had, their energy weapons splashing harmlessly off the crystalline hulls. Kinetic rounds did better, spiderwebbing cracks across the alien surfaces, but the damage sealed itself almost instantly. Chen watched a mining vessel charge straight at one of the Voidborn ships, its industrial cutting lasers carving deep gouges into the crystal. For a moment, it seemed to be working. Then the Voidborn vessel pulsed with inner light, and the mining ship's crew was drawn out in streams of consciousness, their bodies left behind like empty shells. "Mom!" Rivera's shout drew her attention. "Getting a signal from the Europa science vessel Galileo. They say they've analyzed the Voidborn energy patterns. It's similar to their shield harmonics." Chen's mind raced. The Europa colonies had developed revolutionary shield technology, using quantum harmonics to create impenetrable barriers. If the Voidborn were using something similar, "Get me the Galileo's captain," she ordered. When the connection established, she didn't waste time on formalities. "Can you match their frequency?" The Europa captain, a woman with stark white hair and cybernetic enhancements visible around her eyes, nodded. "We think so. But our shields aren't meant to project energy. We'd need something to carry the harmonic pattern." "The Spartan weapons," Chen said. "If we modulate their energy weapons to match your shield frequency." "It could work," the Europa captain agreed. "But we'll need time to make the modifications, and we'll need to get much closer." Chen opened a channel to the Spartan flagship. Its captain's face appeared, streaked with blood from a minor head wound. "We need 5 minutes," she told him. "Can your ships give us that?" The Spartan captain grinned fiercely. "We'll give you 10. What followed was either the bravest or most foolhardy display Chen had ever witnessed. The Spartan ships charged straight at the Voidborn fleet, firing constant barrages of kinetic rounds to keep their attention. Mining vessels joined in, their cutting lasers creating temporary blind spots in the crystalline hulls. Civilian ships darted between the larger vessels, using their superior maneuverability to draw fire. And in the midst of the chaos, engineers from Europa worked frantically to modify the weapon systems of their escorts. Chen had the Hyperion run interference, its point defense systems intercepting the smaller crystal fragments that the Voidborn were now launching like missiles. "Modifications complete on the first ship," Rivera reported. "They're moving into position." The modified vessel, a mid-sized Spartan cruiser, lined up its shot carefully. Its main gun pulsed with energy, but this time the beam was different. It carried the quantum harmonic pattern of Europa's shields. The beam struck a Voidborn ship dead center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the crystalline surface began to resonate, vibrating at frequencies that human eyes could barely process. Cracks appeared, not healing this time but spreading rapidly across the alien hull. The Voidborn ship shattered like glass, its fragments dissolving into normal space. A cheer went up across the fleet, but Chen didn't join in. She was watching the other Voidborn vessels, which had stopped their attack and drawn back, their inner light pulsing in complex patterns. "They're communicating," she realized. "All ships, prepare for." The Voidborn fleet moved as one, their formation shifting into new configurations that seemed to bend space itself. Energy began building between them, more powerful than anything their sensors had registered before. "They're going to." Chen started to warn, but it was too late. The energy released in a massive wave, washing over the human fleet. Ships tumbled out of formation, their systems overloading. The Hyperion's artificial gravity failed, sending crew members floating from their stations. Emergency lights flickered and died. When power returned a few moments later, the Voidborn were gone, but they hadn't retreated empty-handed. 3 human ships were missing, their crews presumably harvested for whatever mysterious purpose drove the crystalline beings. "Damage report," Chen called out, pulling herself back to her station. 8 ships severely damaged, Rivera responded. 4 more reporting minor systems failures. "But Commander," he looked up, his expression mixed with awe and concern. "We hurt them. For the first time since Earth, we actually hurt them." Chen nodded slowly, looking at the field of crystal fragments that was all that remained of the destroyed Voidborn vessel. "Send samples to the Europa science ships for analysis, and get me a status report on the fleet's FTL capabilities. We need to reach Station Omega before they come back in force." As the fleet regrouped and began emergency repairs, Chen couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just witnessed something unprecedented. The Voidborn weren't invincible. They could be fought. They could be destroyed. But she also knew that they'd revealed their hand too soon. The next time they met, the Voidborn would be ready for their harmonic weapons, and something told her they wouldn't underestimate humanity again. The race to Station Omega had become more urgent than ever. The price of memory. Research Station Omega hung in space like a broken promise. Its communication arrays were shattered, its outer hull scarred by weapons fire. But it was intact, and more importantly, it still held atmosphere. Commander Chen led the boarding party herself. The Hyperion sensors had detected no Voidborn presence, but after what they'd seen in the battle, she wasn't taking any chances. Their modified weapons might work against crystalline ships. But nobody knew what a Voidborn looked like in person, if they even had physical forms. "Life support is functioning," reported Dr. Patel, one of the Europa scientists they'd brought along. She studied her handheld scanner as they moved through the airlock. "But power levels are minimal. Emergency systems only." The station's corridors were dark, lit only by their helmet lights and occasional emergency strips along the floor. Chen noticed signs of a struggle, scattered equipment, blast marks on walls, and more disturbing long crystalline growths that seemed to pulse with a dim inner light. "Those weren't here before," Lieutenant Rivera said, gesturing at the crystals. He'd studied the station's original schematics during their approach. "They're growing from the walls themselves." "Don't touch them," Chen ordered. She'd seen enough science fiction to know better. "Dr. Patel, any sign of survivors?" The scientist adjusted her scanner, reading multiple life signs 2 decks down, near the central research lab. "But," she frowned, "the signatures are strange. Fragmented somehow." They found the first body outside the lab, a security officer, still clutching his weapon. His face was frozen in an expression of horror, but what caught Chen's attention was his eyes. They were covered in a thin layer of crystal, like cataracts made of diamonds. The lab itself was a scene from a nightmare. More bodies, some in research uniforms, others in security gear. All had the same crystalline eyes. But it was the center of the lab that drew everyone's attention. A massive crystalline structure dominated the room, its surface rippling with patterns of light that seemed almost familiar. And suspended within it, like insects in amber, were people, dozens of them, their bodies perfectly preserved but empty of life. "My God," Rivera whispered. "Are they dead?" "Not exactly." The voice came from behind them, weak but determined. They turned to find Dr. Alexandra Santos emerging from a hidden alcove, supported by 2 other survivors. Her left arm ended in a crystalline stump, the transformation frozen halfway up her forearm. "Dr. Santos." Chen stepped forward. "We received your signal. We're here to help." Santos laughed, a bitter sound. "Help? You need to destroy this station. Destroy everything we found. It's the only way to stop them." "Stop what?" Chen asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "The harvest." Santos gestured at the crystal structure with her good arm. "We thought they were killing us. They're not. They're preserving us, collecting us. Every human consciousness they take is stored in their crystalline matrix. Earth wasn't destroyed. It was archived." The implications hit Chen like a physical blow. All those people, billions of them, stored like data in some vast alien database. "Why?" "Because we're dying out," Santos said simply. "The Voidborn, they're not invaders. They're archivists, preservers of consciousness. They've been doing this for millions of years, collecting species on the brink of extinction. And somehow, they decided humanity's time was up." "But we're not dying," Rivera protested. "Before they attacked Earth, we were thriving." "Were we?" Santos' eyes were fever-bright. "Climate collapse, nuclear proliferation, resource wars. They saw our trajectory and made a decision. Better to preserve us at our peak than let us fade away naturally." Chen looked at the crystal structure again, seeing it with new eyes. Not a prison, but an ark. A twisted sort of mercy from beings who thought on timescales humans could barely comprehend. "That's not their decision to make," she said firmly. "No," Santos agreed. "It's not. And we found a way to stop them. The crystals, they're not just storage medium. They're connected. Every piece is part of a vast network, storing and sharing consciousness across space itself. But networks can be overloaded." She pointed to a device in the corner, half-assembled and clearly jury-rigged. "We were working on a way to introduce feedback into their system, a consciousness virus, if you will. If we could upload it into their network, it would corrupt their entire archive." Patel finished, understanding dawning on her face. "You could free everyone they've taken, or destroy them completely," Santos admitted. "We never got to test it. They found us first." She held up her crystalline arm. "This is what happens when the process is interrupted. I've got maybe hours before it starts again." Chen made her decision. "We'll evacuate the station. Take your research, your device." "Commander," Rivera's shout cut her off. multiple contacts appearing around the station. Voidborn ships. The crystalline structure in the center of the lab pulsed brighter, its light patterns accelerating. Santos stumbled, clutching her transformed arm as it began to glow. "No time," she gasped. "They're here to collect their lost samples. You have to finish it. The device, the plans are in the main computer. Promise me you'll find a way." Chen wanted to argue, to say they could save everyone, but she saw the truth in Santos's eyes. "I promise." "Good." Santos straightened, stepping away from her supporters. "Get to your ship. I'll buy you time." "How?" The scientist smiled, holding up her crystalline arm. "I'm part of their network now. Just a fragment, but enough to create one hell of a feedback loop." She turned to the massive storage crystal. "Let's see how they like a taste of their own medicine." Chen ordered her team back to the ship, pausing only long enough to download Santos' research data. As they ran through the corridors, the station began to vibrate, crystal growths pulsing with chaotic patterns of light. They were just clearing the airlock when the chain reaction began. The Voidborn ships had surrounded the station, their harvesting beams ready to fire. But Santos struck first. The crystalline structure in the lab detonated, the feedback cascade spreading through every crystal on the station. The blast caught the nearest Voidborn ships, their perfect forms suddenly riddled with discordant patterns. Chen watched from the Hyperion's bridge as the destruction spread from ship to ship, the network they relied on becoming their undoing. When it was over, Station Omega was gone, along with a third of the Voidborn fleet. But they'd gained something precious: knowledge. And with it, hope. The Voidborn weren't gods. They weren't invincible. They were just beings with technology humanity could understand, analyze, and, potentially, defeat. But as Chen looked at the research data they'd recovered, she realized their real work was just beginning. Because Santos had left them more than just a weapon. She'd left them a choice: find a way to free the stored consciousnesses, or destroy them to stop the Voidborn once and for all. The price of victory might be the final death of everyone they were trying to save. Children of Steel. "The integration process will hurt," Dr. Patel warned, making final adjustments to the neural interface array. "Your consciousness will be trying to exist in two spaces at once." Commander Chen lay in the integration chamber, surrounded by Europa's most advanced medical technology, merged with salvaged Voidborn crystal fragments. The chamber itself was a triumph of human engineering, or an abomination, depending on who you asked. "Just do it," she said. The fleet had lost 3 more battles since Station Omega. The Voidborn had adapted to their harmonic weapons, their crystalline forms evolving new configurations that were immune to the original frequency. They needed an advantage, and they needed it now. Patel nodded and initiated the sequence. Pain exploded through Chen's consciousness as crystal-enhanced quantum processors interfaced directly with her neural patterns. She felt herself stretching, expanding, becoming something more than flesh and less than human. Then suddenly she was everywhere at once. She could feel the Hyperion around her, not just as a commander reading reports, but as an awareness that extended through every system. She was the ship, and the ship was her. Integration successful. Patel's voice seemed to come from both her ears and the ship's internal sensors simultaneously. "How do you feel?" Chen opened her eyes, both her physical ones and the Hyperion's sensor arrays. Ready. She wasn't the only one. Across the fleet, other captains were undergoing the same transformation. The Europa scientists called it the synthesis protocol, a way to merge human consciousness with quantum computing systems enhanced by repurposed Voidborn crystal technology. It let them process information at speeds that could match their alien enemies, controlling their ships with thought alone. But there was a cost. Each integration changed the participants slightly, leaving trace amounts of crystal in their neural pathways. No one knew what the long-term effects would be. Voidborn fleet detected, Rivera reported from his station. But Chen had already sensed them through the Hyperion's enhanced detection systems. She could see the complex patterns of their approach, predict their attack vectors with mathematical precision. All ships, battle formation Delta, she commanded, her thoughts transmitting directly to the other integrated captains. The fleet moved with perfect synchronization, each ship anticipating the other's actions. The Voidborn attacked with their usual crystalline grace, but this time they faced an enemy that could think at their speed. Chen redirected power through the Hyperion systems faster than any human reaction time would allow, matching the alien's quantum speed decisions with her own. Around her, the integrated fleet performed like a single organism. Spartan warships provided covering fire, while Europa science vessels analyzed attack patterns in real time. Mining ships used their industrial lasers with surgical precision, targeting weak points identified by their enhanced sensors. But it was the new weapons that made the real difference. Instead of trying to match the Voidborn's frequencies, they now generated randomized patterns of quantum interference. The crystalline ships couldn't adapt to what they couldn't predict. Their formation is breaking, Rivera announced, but Chen was already moving the fleet to exploit the weakness. She could feel the other captain's thoughts brushing against hers through their shared quantum network, coordinating their attack with inhuman precision. The Voidborn ships began to fall back, their usual perfect coordination disrupted by the humans' newfound capabilities. For the first time since Earth's fall, they were retreating. Victory should have felt sweeter, but as Chen directed the Hyperion through the debris field of shattered crystal ships, she felt something disturbing. The integrated captain's thoughts were becoming more synchronized, their individual patterns bleeding into each other through the quantum network. They were thinking less like separate humans and more like Commander. Rivera's voice snapped her back to her physical form. Something's wrong with the other ships. Chen looked through both her eyes and her sensors. The integrated vessels were moving strangely, their formations shifting into geometric patterns that looked disturbingly familiar. No, she whispered, realizing what was happening. Sever all quantum connections between ships. Emergency disconnect. Now. But it was too late for some. The crystals in their neural interfaces had reached critical mass, transforming their integrated captains into something no longer entirely human. Their ships began to move with the same fluid grace as the Voidborn, their hulls taking on a crystalline sheen. Chen watched in horror as a third of her fleet turned against the rest, their weapons firing with terrible precision. The transformed captains were becoming what they had fought so hard against: perfect, immortal, and utterly inhuman. All non-integrated ships, fall back, she ordered, fighting against the crystalline whispers in her own mind. Emergency shutdown of all quantum systems. The pain of disconnection was almost as bad as integration had been. Chen fell back into her purely human consciousness, feeling small and slow and desperately alive. Around her, the Hyperion systems returned to normal operation, the crystal-enhanced processors going dark. They had won their battle against the Voidborn, but the victory had come with a terrible price. The transformed ships vanished into deep space, taking their captains with them. Whether they would join the Voidborn or become something entirely new, Chen couldn't guess. In the aftermath, as rescue operations began and damage reports flooded in, Chen made her way to the medical bay. Dr. Patel was already analyzing data from the incident, her face grave. "The crystal integration," Chen said. "Can you remove it?" Patel shook her head. "It's bonded to your neural pathways. The most we can do is try to prevent it from spreading further." She looked up from her displays. "We've lost our advantage. Without integration, we can't fight them on equal terms." "No," Chen agreed, touching the small crystal formations that had begun to spread from her neural implants. "But maybe we don't need to. Dr. Santos' research, the consciousness virus, could we modify it? Not to destroy the stored consciousness, but to free them." Patel's eyes widened as she understood. Use their own network against them. Give the archived humans a chance to fight back from within. Can you do it? Maybe. But we'll need help. Patel gestured at the crystal growths on Chen's skin. Someone who understands both human and voidborn systems. Someone who's been both. Chen looked at her reflection in a nearby screen, at the hints of crystal that marked her as no longer entirely human. Then we better get started. Because next time we face them, it won't just be a battle for survival. It'll be a battle for the soul of humanity itself. The transformed ships were out there somewhere, their captains becoming something post-human. The Voidborn were regrouping, adapting to their defeats, and trapped within their crystalline archives. Billions of human consciousness waited for either liberation or oblivion. The final battle would determine not just who would survive, but what it truly meant to be human in a universe of ancient crystal gods. Tomorrow's light. The crystalline fleets filled local space like a shattered mirror, fragments of light reflecting endlessly between Voidborn ships and their transformed human counterparts. Commander Chen watched them through the Hyperion's enhanced sensors, the crystal formations in her neural pathways humming with recognition. Status report, she ordered, fighting back the whispers that tried to sync her thoughts with the vast network spreading before them. 37 Voidborn capital ships, Rivera said from his station. 22 transformed human vessels. They're arranged in some kind of geometric formation we've never seen before. They're creating a resonance pattern, Dr. Paddle explained from her temporary station on the bridge. The scientist hadn't slept in days, working to perfect their modified version of Santos's consciousness virus. It's like they're building a larger version of their consciousness storage matrix. Chen nodded, understanding with both her human mind and her crystal-enhanced perceptions. They're preparing for a mass harvesting. Not just ships or stations this time. The colonies, Rivera whispered. All of them. The remaining human fleet looked pitifully small in comparison. 16 ships that had survived the previous battles, their crews choosing to retain their humanity rather than submit to full integration. They carry humanity's last hope, a quantum virus designed to free the stored consciousnesses rather than destroy them. But to deliver it, they would have to get close enough to interface with the Voidborn network. And now they faced not only the original crystal ships but their own transformed kindred, former friends and colleagues who had become something post-human. All ships, prepare for combat, Chen ordered, pushing aside the grief of what was to come. Remember the plan. The Hyperion will lead the primary assault. While we keep them occupied, the Europa science vessels will move into position and... Commander, Rivera interrupted, his voice tight. We're receiving a transmission from the transformed fleet. Chen felt her crystal implants resonate as the signal came through. The face that appeared on her screen was both familiar and alien. Captain Marcus Drake of the Spartan warship Thermopylae, one of the first to undergo integration. His skin had a translucent quality now, crystal formations framing his face like elegant circuitry. Sarah, he said, using her first name as he had when they were colleagues. You don't need to fight us. What we've become, it's beautiful. We understand now what the Voidborn have been trying to do. This isn't extinction, it's transcendence. Transcendence. Chen kept her voice steady, despite the anger building inside her. You're talking about the forced absorption of every human consciousness in existence. That's not transcendence, Marcus. It's genocide. Is it genocide to preserve something forever? To save it from decay and death? Drake's crystalline eyes pulsed with inner light. The Voidborn have been doing this for millions of years, saving species after species from extinction. They exist as pure consciousness now, free from the limitations of physical form. We could all be part of that. Eternal. Perfect. But no longer human, Chen countered. No longer free to choose our own path, make our own mistakes, grow in our own way. She leaned forward. Tell me, Marcus, when was the last time you disagreed with the other transformed captains? When was the last time you had a thought that wasn't shared by your entire network? Drake's expression flickered, a moment of uncertainty crossing his crystalline features. Then it was gone, replaced by serene certainty. This is your last chance, Stura. Join us willingly, or we'll be forced to take more direct action. Chen cut the transmission. All ships, battle stations. They'll be coming in hard now. The attack began with mathematical precision. Transformed human ships moving in perfect coordination with their voidborn allies. They struck from multiple vectors simultaneously, their weapons enhanced by their shared consciousness network. But Chen had planned for this. The human fleet split into seemingly random patterns, each ship operating independently and unpredictably. They couldn't match the enemy's coordination, but they could use chaos to their advantage. Multiple hits on decks 3 through 7. Rivera reported as the Hyperion shuddered under enemy fire. Shield harmonics holding at 60%. Chen guided the ship through a series of evasive maneuvers, her crystal implants giving her just enough enhanced processing speed to stay ahead of their attackers. Around her, the battle unfolded like a deadly dance, energy weapons and quantum torpedoes lighting up space. Europa science vessels in position, Patil announced. Initiating virus upload. This was the moment everything depended on. The science ships had modified their harmonic weapons to carry Santos's consciousness virus, enhanced by data from their own crystal integrations. If it worked, it would spread through the voidborn network, giving the stored human consciousnesses a chance to break free. The first virus-laden beam struck a voidborn ship, its crystalline surface rippling with new patterns. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the ship's movements became erratic, its perfect coordination failing. "It's working," Patil said excitedly. "The stored consciousnesses are awakening. They're fighting back." The effect spread through the voidborn fleet like a wave, ship after ship beginning to move erratically as billions of human minds stored within their crystal matrices regained awareness. The transformed human vessels tried to compensate, their own network struggling to maintain coherence. But something unexpected was happening. As the stored consciousnesses awoke, they weren't simply fighting back, they were communicating. Through the crystal network, human minds were touching ancient voidborn thoughts, understanding flowing both ways. Chen felt it through her own implants, fragments of revelation bleeding through the quantum link. The voidborn weren't just preservers of dying species. They were the last survivors of the universe's first technological civilization, who had seen their own kind fall to entropy and time. In their grief and fear, they had devoted themselves to saving others from the same fate, even if it meant taking away their freedom to choose that fate for themselves. Commander Rivera's voice seemed to come from far away. The transformed ships, their changing formation. The hybrid fleet was indeed moving, but not to attack. They were arranging themselves in a new pattern, one that resonated with both human and voidborn frequencies. Through her crystal connection, Chen could feel Drake and the other transformed captains struggling with their own revelation. They had become something between human and voidborn, able to understand both perspectives. And now they had a choice to make. Drake's transmission cut through the chaos. His crystalline features were twisted with emotion, something the voidborn had forgotten how to feel. "Sarah, we were wrong. Both of us. There's another way." The battle fell silent as ancient crystal ships and transformed human vessels aligned themselves in a vast geometric array. Energy began to flow between them, not the harvesting beams of before, but something new, something that carried echoes of both human passion and voidborn precision. "They're creating a new kind of storage matrix," Patil realized, reading the energy patterns, one that preserves consciousness while maintaining individuality. A true synthesis, not an absorption. Through the quantum link, Chen felt the truth of it. The transformed humans had found a middle path, a way to share the voidborn's immortality while keeping their human capacity for growth and change. And they were offering this path to everyone, both the stored consciousnesses and those still in flesh, not as a forced harvesting, but as a choice. "The network is opening," Patil reported. They're releasing the stored consciousnesses, all of them. Space itself seemed to shimmer as billions of human minds were freed from crystal stasis. Some chose to return to biological form, their patterns transferring to waiting cloned bodies. Others opted for the new synthesis, joining the transformed fleet in their hybrid existence. And some, to everyone's surprise, chose to remain with the Voidborn, fascinated by the ancient crystal beings and their million-year history. "What happens now?" Rivera asked softly. Chen looked out at the transformed fleet, at the ancient crystal ships that had been their enemies and might now become their teachers, at the endless possibilities spreading out before them like stars. "Now," she said, feeling the crystal in her own mind humming with potential, "we choose our own path, all of us together." The war for humanity's future was over, but humanity's true journey, as a species that could be both flesh and crystal, mortal and eternal, individual and connected, was just beginning. They had faced extinction and transcended it, not by surrendering their humanity, but by expanding their definition of what humanity could become. And somewhere out there, in the vast dark between the stars, Dr. Santo's consciousness smiled from within a crystal matrix, knowing that humanity had found not just survival, but a future worthy of all they had sacrificed to reach it. The light of tomorrow would shine with both human fire and crystal clarity, illuminating a universe of endless possibility.